Hi, I'm Sam Breakgear and welcome to the Sociable podcast. If you ever thought about buying Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies but were unsure of how it all works or even when to get started, you're in the right place. On this episode, we will take a brief look into the world of cryptocurrencies and how anyone, no matter their technical background, can safely buy and store any of the top currencies on the market at the moment. To help with this, I'm joined by cryptocurrency expert Jack Dossman, the founder of Crypto Beginners, and a website containing the best crypto resources from around the web, allowing beginners to learn about Bitcoin, Ethereum, blockchain, and all things crypto. After being frustrated with the lack of easy to digest, trustworthy information online, Dossman decided to put a resource together to make it easy for beginners to learn about crypto and blockchain tech. He frequently blogs on Medium about the fundamentals of getting started with crypto, and he is the second most popular writer regarding Bitcoin, with over 600 followers and 50,000 plus story views in the past few months. Before we start, please remember that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not a for sure return of investment, and you should never buy or invest more than you can afford to lose, as these currencies are still very volatile. Well, I suppose if we want to get started, would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in this area?
Yeah, so I've been into crypto for well over a year now. I'm not, one of these old heads in the space, but I sort of started getting into it mid last year and found it incredibly difficult to find information about crypto online. And so from there, I just got pretty fed up with everything that was available, so I decided to make my own resource, which basically collects all the best information you can find on crypto online in one place. And sort of been doing that for about 6 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I suppose there's a lot of people out there that might be listening to this. The majority of them might know what blockchain is to some degree or not. But I suppose, would you, with your knowledge and background, be able to give some clarity towards what blockchain actually is, and also the top cryptos that are out there and why they've come to exist?
Yeah, so blockchain's a really sort of difficult thing to get your head around if you just hear about it in the news, or one of your friends is talking about how much money they're making. But essentially, blockchain as a technology is pretty much just a type of database. So it might sound, hard to get your head around initially, but it's a type of database that, like all databases, stores information about things, but it's got a couple of unique attributes. So the biggest one being it can be decentralized, which means the database can exist simultaneously across a number of different computers across the world in the same state. And in order for people to put information in that database, they all need to agree on the information that goes in. So everyone needs to have consensus on the information that they're putting in. And also the information is add only. So once you put information in, you can't then edit that or take that information out. So that information exists on that database forever. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of other little things. So the new information can't conflict with what's already added, so similar to the add only. And everybody on the network, so everybody who has a copy of that database can then access that and upload their information. So that database structure works perfectly for something like Bitcoin, where you have taken away the central authority in the space. So essentially these days everybody uses banks, and banks are just the central authority for the control of money. And so we trust them with our money. We can give it to them and say, you guys hold it securely, make sure all the transfers work. And we have no idea what they do, but we hope and we trust that what they're going to do is the right thing. But with Bitcoin, you take away that central authority. And so the system becomes trustless, essentially, because everybody on the network has to abide by the rules of this blockchain. So the blockchain that sits underneath Bitcoin has a certain set of rules, and everybody who's transacting and moving money around on the system has to abide by these rules. So the blockchain is the perfect application for cryptocurrency.
Fantastic. And I suppose most people have probably heard of Bitcoin as the main one, but there are plenty of other, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, there's thousands of cryptocurrencies out there.
Yeah, at the moment there's quite a few.
What are the main contenders in your opinion, and what I suppose what advantages they have over how do they differ, I suppose, from Bitcoin that everyone's heard of?
Yeah, so Bitcoin's the main one. Everyone knows about that. It went through a 13,000% rise last year, I'm pretty sure. So, once something's making money, everyone's talking about it. And Bitcoin's still really the main crypto in the space. So I think Bitcoin's market share of all cryptocurrencies is about 40% at the moment, 45%. And really, when Bitcoin moves, the market moves. So it's really still the main player in crypto at the moment. But you've got a couple of other cryptos coming up. So one that most people who are familiar with the space would have heard of is Ethereum. So Ethereum is quite similar to Bitcoin, but it builds on it and has one main addition in a very specific way, which is it adds a level of programmability to Bitcoin. So Ethereum can be used as a store of value. You can use it to make transactions, just like Bitcoin, but at the same time, you can do what they call in Ethereum as smart contracts. So essentially what a smart contract is it allows you to send money to another person, but on a certain set of conditions. So you can say, if this condition is met, then send this amount of money. And that piece of technology allows you to do a lot of interesting things. So Ethereum will allow you to build what they call decentralized applications on top of the Ethereum blockchain. So similar to the App Store where you can build applications, Ethereum allows you to build decentralized applications, which rely on the fundamental principles of the blockchain that I spoke about before, and will allow you to build applications in that way. So Ethereum has really been, since 2014, 2015, the second biggest in the crypto space. Then I think at the moment number 3 is Ripple. So Ripple is a little bit different to most other cryptos in that it's quite centralized. So the whole purpose of cryptocurrency is decentralization, whereas Ripple was built as what they call an enterprise payment network. So they're really aiming for the banks. They're not really aiming for everyday people to use their currency. They're aiming for the banks as their customers. So they want to be basically a settlement network between banks for international transfers. So at the moment, it takes 3 to 5 days to process transactions internationally, and it's a massive headache, and the banks have a really hard time doing it. So Ripple wants to sit in that middle layer to be able to process those transactions. There has been a bit of controversy about Ripple, just about their level of decentralization, but I think recently they've released some new software and they're going pretty well. So that's Ripple. Then next up, we've got Bitcoin Cash. So Bitcoin Cash was a fork of Bitcoin in August of last year. And so what a fork is essentially when all the developers of a cryptocurrency can't decide on the next piece of software they want to implement. So if one group of developers says, we want to implement this, another group says, we want to implement that, and they can't agree, they have to basically split the blockchain. So Bitcoin Cash split off from Bitcoin. And so they have a shared history, but every transaction that occurred after that split is on a different chain and a completely different set of histories after that point. And if you Google Bitcoin Cash, you'll find plenty of controversy surrounding them. There's some very interesting plays in that space. And then you've got some other big cryptos called like EOS. EOS is similar to Ethereum in a way in what they're trying to do. But they're adding on a few more layers of technology, and they have a few very distinct bits of information and bits of software they're trying to implement. Nice. And then you've got Litecoin. Litecoin was implemented by a bloke called Charlie Lee, and so he's always said that he views Litecoin as the silver to Bitcoin's gold. So Litecoin is a sort of lighter, faster version of Bitcoin, but obviously not as valuable. So it's probably more able to be used for smaller transactions because Bitcoin's transaction fees are a bit higher, but because it's not as valuable and there aren't as many people on the network, it doesn't quite have the same weight as Bitcoin. So they're really some of the main plays in the space. You can go on for hours about all of them, but generally the top 10, top 20 cryptos on, something like CoinMarketCap will be the most important ones in the space and ones that are the least likely to be scams.
Yeah. No, I see them coming up a lot. I suppose the next thing and I suppose this is the main thing for the podcast. Most people, when it comes to these cryptocurrencies or the idea of buying Bitcoin or getting involved, it can be quite scary or intimidating if you don't have the technical knowledge of knowing how to buy them or where to even get started. I suppose if someone was to come to you or to look on your website and they wanted to get started and just simply purchase Bitcoin, what would you suggest as the safest or easiest way about doing this?
Yeah, it is really pretty scary once you first start if you don't have much knowledge in the space. But the dead easiest way to get crypto, get your hands on crypto is Coinbase. So Coinbase is one of the biggest exchanges of cryptocurrencies. It's by far the most user-friendly. They don't focus on traders. So a lot of these exchanges you go onto will be focused on traders, and it just looks like a complete mess, and you just want to run away as soon as you get on the site. But Coinbase is the easiest way to do it. They've got a really simple interface. The sign-up process arduous in a way, like you have to upload a lot of your personal information. But once you do that, you can buy and trade, I think it's the top 5 or so cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and a couple of others really easily. So that's definitely the best way to do it.
Is it specifically located in can you do that anywhere in the world, or is it strictly for certain countries or areas where you can purchase Bitcoin through this method?
The sign-up process will be slightly different for certain countries. I'm not 100% sure if Coinbase will prevent you from signing up if you're in a certain country, but the idea of cryptocurrencies you can buy from anywhere in the world. So Coinbase is one of the easiest places to buy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but there are many other exchanges that will allow you to do that. So I'd be incredibly surprised if whatever country you live in that you couldn't get your hands on any Bitcoin.
Awesome. And then say someone does buy some Bitcoin, for example. One thing that I've always seen, and I know the Reddit community or Reddit's Bitcoin community is very, very vocal. Don't keep your currency or your Bitcoin or anything on exchanges. Is Coinbase an exchange, and what is the threat of keeping it on an exchange?
Yeah, so pretty much anywhere online that you can buy and trade cryptocurrencies is an exchange. So the point of not keeping your crypto on an exchange is that if it exists on an exchange, you don't have full control over that cryptocurrency. So if your crypto is on Coinbase, and in the very, very unlikely scenario that Coinbase gets hacked, although exchanges have been hacked in the past, you lose all your coins. So Coinbase is essentially what they call a honeypot, where they have millions and millions of customers, and all their customers, or a lot of their customers, are storing their cryptos on Coinbase. So instead of just hacking one individual and stealing whatever small amount of cryptocurrency they may have, if you can hack Coinbase, then you can steal everything on there and make hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. So that's basically the central principle, that if you store your cryptos on an exchange, you're sort of asking for them to be lost. Whereas if you store them yourself, whether that's on a hardware wallet or on a software app, you have full control over that and you're responsible for your crypto, which also comes with the caveat that you have to be responsible with it. You can't just leave it in the bank like you do currently or leave it on an exchange. You really have to be responsible with how you're storing that.
And say if you did keep your cryptocurrency on an exchange, and they were unfortunate enough to be hacked or something was to happen, is the exchange at all liable? Do they have any kind of responsibility, or are they even if they didn't have responsibility, are they going to likely to be altruistic and give you some of that back? Or is there no precedence of them being sorry, it's gone?
You would hope so. So one of the largest hacks that's ever occurred within Bitcoin was the Mt. Gox hack in 2014. So just to be clear, Bitcoin itself has never been hacked. So Bitcoin itself is an incredibly secure system. because of the way that it's set up and the security that it's embedded within the network. But and this is why everyone says don't keep your cryptos on an exchange, because exchanges are very vulnerable to these hacks. So this hack in 2014, Mt. Gox, was the biggest Bitcoin exchange at the time, and they lost, I think it was something in the region at the time of $400 million. And you wouldn't want to imagine what all that Bitcoin's worth now, but I think they tried to give back some of the Bitcoin to their customers, but the vast majority of it's lost. And once someone pinches your Bitcoin or your cryptocurrency from your wallet or from an exchange, it's very, very, very difficult to get it back.
Mm-hmm. And I know there's a saying in the cryptocurrency world, which is, or Bitcoin certainly, where it goes, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. And I think that generally refers to what you just said, where if you don't hold it and take care of it yourself, then you really don't own that Bitcoin. Are you able to explain that in a little bit better detail than I'm trying to?
Yeah, no, I understand the reference. I think it was Andreas Antonopoulos who said that. He's probably one of the biggest Bitcoin educator in the world at the moment. He's brilliant. So basically the principle is, when you have a Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency hardware wallet, or any sort of wallet, you have what they call public and private keys. And the easiest way to understand this is if you think about a letterbox. So with a letterbox, everybody knows where it is, everybody knows your address, and everybody can deposit letters into your account. It's the same with Bitcoin. With your public key, that's what you use for everybody to send you crypto. So sometimes you'll come across a website and down the bottom it'll say, donate with Bitcoin, and you'll see a string of characters. So it's a 34-digit string of letters and numbers, and that's basically the public address or the public key. So everybody can send Bitcoin to that address, but that's not where anybody can take out Bitcoin from that address. That is done with the private key. So the private key is what accesses your wallet. So that's basically your key or your passcode to your letterbox. So only you have that key, hopefully, and only you can access all the letters or all the transactions that are coming into that account. So if you don't have access, if you don't hold your private key, because your money exists, your cryptocurrency exists on an exchange, then you don't control that cryptocurrency. So when you buy on Coinbase, your crypto will sit in what they call a crypto wallet. But it's not technically a wallet because you don't control the keys. So what you want to do is buy that crypto and then find a wallet, whether that's, and we can get into this later if you like, but whether that's an online wallet or an offline wallet, so an app, or like the hardware wallet's really generally a USB type device. So the best thing to do is buy it on Coinbase and then transfer that out to a wallet where you control the keys, and then you're responsible for your crypto.
And you mentioned the private key. Is that similar to the public key in its appearance? Is that also like a 30-something character long series of numbers and letters, or does it differ?
No, it's pretty similar. The public key is 34 digits, and the private key is 64, 68, something like that. But it's just a string of lowercase, uppercase letters and numbers. Mm-hmm. So one way to get around, having to memorize 64 digits, and some people do it. So one of the draw cards of cryptocurrency is that you can walk across borders with millions of dollars of cryptocurrency with your private key stored in your head. And so you can really access that from wherever you like if you can remember that private key. So you can walk around with however much Bitcoin or cryptocurrency you can possibly have without anybody knowing about it, which is brilliant. But one way to get around that memorization of the 64-digit private key, because you definitely don't want to forget it. A lot of wallets will have what they call seed phrases or recovery phrases. So it's a series of 12. I think it's generally 12 words, and they're just like common words but randomly generated that can stand in for your private key. So if you can memorize that string of 12 words, then you can access your wallet.
So it's more or less this. Is it that some wallets use the private key, and then some wallets just have this recovery phrase that you said, or is it that all wallets have it and then they kind of translate it, or how does that work? How is the compatibility there?
Every cryptocurrency wallet has to have a private and a public key, and that's because of the encryption that goes on within cryptocurrencies, and that's where crypto comes from. But to make it, I guess, more user-friendly, a lot of wallets will have that seed phrase or recovery phrase that, I guess, stands in for the private key.
Yeah. Cool. I actually recently heard a story where a woman was creating jewelry, and I shouldn't think they created chains, and they added one word of their recovery phrase to each. They ingrained it into each of the chains, so that way they could carry around their recovery phrase as a chain without anyone knowing. Yeah, and I thought that was incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, that's great.
But you touched on this earlier, actually, the difference in wallets. Would you be able to explain what wallets exist and what's the difference, I suppose, in user friendliness or security? And
Yeah, so there are two types of wallets that exist. I'll touch on those and then we can talk about security a little bit. So basically the two types of wallets are online wallets and offline wallets, or software wallets and hardware wallets. So obviously software online, it's easier to use, but you have a greater ability to be hacked. So anything that's connected to the internet is in some way vulnerable to being hacked. It could be incredibly unlikely, but you're just increasing your risk. So online wallets or software wallets can be desktop or mobile apps, or exchanges. But exchanges, like I said, aren't really considered wallets, but it is a way to store your crypto. So you can download Bitcoin specific or certain crypto specific wallets or general wallets. So some of those apps include Jax, I think that's a big one. There are a few others that will store multiple cryptos. And so essentially what you can do is you buy Bitcoin from Coinbase, and then you download one of these wallets, and the wallet will have a public address for, say, Bitcoin. So you bought Bitcoin, it'll come up with that 34-digit string, and then you jump on your Coinbase account, type in that string, or a lot of them do a QR code, so you can just scan a QR code, and then that address will pop up, and then you press send, and then it will send all that Bitcoin to your wallet. And so your wallet will now have access and control over that cryptocurrency. And hardware wallets, obviously similar principle, but it exists as a physical device. So two of the biggest players in this space are Ledger Nano and Trezor. So they both develop, what you call USB wallets. So it looks like a USB device. You plug it into your computer when you want to transfer your cryptocurrency, but it exists offline. So unless somebody physically breaks into your house and forces you to give up your recovery phrase, you can't get hacked, essentially. The biggest risk with those, obviously, is if you lose them. So there's been instances in the past where people have, mined Bitcoin in the early days, made God knows how much money, and then accidentally thrown away their USB device into a dumpster and been dumpster diving for days trying to find it. So if you lose your USB device and you've got a lot of crypto on there, it'd be pretty painful. But they're generally more secure than online wallets, but obviously it's a bit more difficult to use. They're still in the early days of, I guess, user friendliness and figuring out how to most easily allow people to use this sort of stuff.
Fantastic. And sorry, continue. I was just going to bring up paper wallets. Yes. I know that's supposedly one of the most secure options, but again, that sounds pretty scary considering. Well, I can imagine it's one thing to lose the USB, but trying to keep a piece of paper safe if it's worth thousands or hundreds of thousands potentially is going to be even scarier.
Yeah, exactly right. So paper wallets are another version of offline wallets, like the USB ones, where essentially there are a couple of resources to do it online, and basically it uses some of them do, the random movements of your mouse on your computer to generate a random string of digits, and that random string of digits becomes your set of keys. And so you by doing it that way, they're not just generating one for you. Then you send all your crypto to that address and they pinch it from you. So it's completely randomly generated, and then it spits out your public and private keys. And then essentially what you can do is print that off and store that offline, or you can just copy it down and write it on a piece of paper, and then you can send your cryptos to that address. and yeah, you control it, but it's on a piece of paper. So unless you want to get it laminated and stored in a vault or something, it's pretty vulnerable to degrading or being lost or burnt down or in a flood, or you can think of any number of ways that could be destroyed. So it's pretty risky, but yeah, it's the most secure way of storing your crypto.
Sure. I suppose a bit of a jump onto a different subject now. One thing I did want to ask you about is mining fees. Mm-hmm. To what extent do they, I suppose actually starting off, what are they? Why do they exist, and what are mining fees?
Okay, so with cryptocurrency, you can go down a massive rabbit hole into the exact technical details of why things occur. I'll try not to do that because we'll be here for hours. But essentially, what miners are on, let's just say, the Bitcoin network, miners exist to essentially secure the network. So every time a transaction goes through, a great analogy of this is every transaction that goes through gets put into a group, and that group then needs to be verified at some point. And so every group, or block, if you want to call it that, it's the term blockchain, every block gets tacked onto the end of the chain. And as the deeper you go into that chain, it's like an insect being stored in amber. So every extra layer of amber that gets laid onto this thing means it's older and older and older, and you can trust how old that insect is. It's the same thing with the blockchain. So the deeper into the chain this transaction is, the older the transaction is, and the more transactions that have been done on top of it, the more secure it is. So the miners essentially do a lot of calculations on computers, and you've probably heard about this with these crazy electricity fees. There's people in regional China and Russia, making these massive plants just to pump out all these computer transactions. So essentially what they're doing is doing a bunch of computer work to verify that all these transactions are going through. And so for their efforts, they get rewarded every time a transaction occurs. And they also get rewarded for, trying to keep it as simple as possible, basically finding new Bitcoins. So every 10 minutes, a new reward is given, and at the moment it's about 12.5 Bitcoins. So if you're part of a mining pool, or if you're one of these big miners who's cranking out all these transactions and all these calculations, you can get rewarded with that 12 Bitcoin. So that's what's in it for them. But essentially, whenever you send, if I send a bit of Bitcoin to you, it doesn't matter how much it is. It's always just a flat fee. For that transaction, I need to pay those miners in order to secure my transaction to you. So you know that the Bitcoin I'm sending is legit, and I know it's gone to where it needs to go. Those miners do a little bit of work, and they get a little reward for that.
Okay, excellent. And I suppose that the final thing that I really want to talk about, and it's probably going to take up a bit of time just because it's such a big subject and you hear about it so much, is just general security. Mm-hmm. I know that every day there seems to be headlines that there's been some kind of security or fraud or something involving Elon Musk or the founder of Ethereum or whatever. And there's and at first it confused me when I saw I can never pronounce the guy's name, the founder of Ethereum, and other people. Yeah, and they always say not giving away free crypto or not giving. Yep. And at first I was like, wow, that seems really rude to be that blunt about maybe they just get approached all the time, being and obviously me being the novice to this industry, I didn't realize that it was such a big thing that people impersonate them, and there seems to be a multitude of just scams that have just flourished within the past couple of years. So I suppose if you can provide any guidance on how the best way to avoid becoming a victim and what you should look out for when getting involved in cryptocurrency.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest problems with getting into crypto at the moment, that people call it the Wild West for a reason, because it's so easy for your crypto to be lost, because one, it's difficult to do if you're a beginner, and two, if somebody manages to steal the crypto from your wallet, it's pretty much impossible to get it back. There's no central authority you can go to get them to help you out. Bitcoin is pretty much anonymous, so you don't know where that cryptocurrency has gone. There are quite a few risks at the moment. But in saying that, it's not particularly difficult to protect yourself, especially if you're not a big name like Elon Musk. So to answer what you said before about Elon and Vitalik, people stealing crypto. So I think back in the early days of crypto, it was reasonably common for people to give each other like tips or donations in Bitcoin. And so that's sort of how the community developed. That if you were doing something cool, people would just, drop you a little bit of Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything like that, just to say thanks. And so that sort of morphed into people just asking for crypto all the time now, which is really strange. But then you'll get these scammers on mostly Twitter who will, have the same photo as Elon Musk or Vitalik, have a really similar username. So it'd be like Elon with two N's, Musk. And so it's really difficult to tell the difference. And sometimes they'll even steal a verified member's Twitter handle, so they've got that little blue tick, so it looks even more official. And then they'll post up a thing under, say, Elon Musk's tweet saying, "Oh, just another thing, I'm giving away 20 Ethereum. So send me a little bit of Ethereum, and then I'll send you 20 Ethereum back if you win." And so if you're new to the space, or you just don't really know what's going on, it's easy to think, "Oh, cool, like I want 20 Ethereum," and then obviously they'll just take your Ethereum and knock it back. So that's been really prevalent, and Twitter have actually been speaking about it recently, about how they can try and eradicate it. But one solution Vitalik has come up with, like you said, is actually writing in his Twitter name saying Vitalik non-giver of Ether. Just so you know that's really him, it's not an impersonation, and he's not going to give you any Ether.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the more egregious ways of being hacked. There are a bunch of other ones. Another one that's really quite interesting is, I mean, none of it happens to you, but it's social engineering. So basically, social engineering is when you're not actually being hacked in terms of, someone using computer code to infiltrate your systems. So social engineering hacks often occur when hackers will call up your, and this has happened to quite a few people recently, they can call up these people's phone provider and then pretend to be them or pretend to be their partner and say, please transfer this phone number over to a new SIM card. And they control the SIM card, and then they can use like phone authentication. You know how like sometimes you sign up to certain things and they'll say text you a code. They can use that to get into that person's email address. And so once they're verified and into their email account, they can then reset their passwords on their exchange accounts, on every type of crypto that they're involved with, unless it's a wallet. Because if it's a wallet, it's offline, or they won't really have access to it. But if their crypto exists on an exchange, say I've got a bunch of Bitcoin on Coinbase, they can reset my Coinbase password, get access to my Coinbase account, maybe even use my credit card to buy more crypto, and then siphon off all that cryptocurrency somewhere else. So it's a really low-tech way of gaining access to somebody's account. But if you have good two-factor authentication, so if you use a 2FA app rather than your phone, then it's impossible because they need your device and they need all your account information. So that's a really easy way to avoid being hacked that way. But generally, if you don't leave your crypto on an exchange, if you use two-factor authentication for all your accounts, so a good two-factor authentication app is just the Google Authenticator. That's perfectly fine. And you have a password manager with strong passwords on all your accounts. So if you use LastPass or 1Password, they're really good. Password managers, you can set 20, 30, 40 character passwords for all your things. So, and you don't have to remember them, which is the best thing. Instead of using the same terrible 8-character password for every account. It makes it so much easier. You can set really strong passwords and you don't have to worry about it, and it really reduces your risk of having your crypto stolen.
Awesome. Well, that sounds it's good to know. I think one other thing that I've seen as well, which confuses me slightly, is that sometimes I see people that do use cryptocurrency in the subreddits that I read, is that sometimes people will be contacted or believe they're contacted by, like, say, Binance or Coinbase, and then it turns out that perhaps they're not being contacted, or similar, like you said, they've been socially engineered to give up their password. Is that something which I suppose happens a lot, or it seems to be fairly frequent on the Reddit channels, or either that or just the the customer service for these exchanges is so terrible that they think they're being hacked?
No, that is a pretty prevalent scam. So yeah, either people posting out links that look like they're to Binance, or another exchange that really is something else. Another one that I find fascinating is someone registering. So say we're talking about Binance, for example, which is one of the biggest exchanges. Someone registering a domain name, so a URL that's incredibly similar to Binance, has the same characters, but you can register a URL and have a character in that URL that is like a U, for example, with a dot at the top of it, which is a different character to an actual U. And so people will do that and then pretty much exactly replicate what Binance looks like. But then obviously if you buy crypto, just go straight to them. And the only way you can tell the difference between the real Binance site and their site is that tiny little dot above the U in the URL bar of your browser, which is just incredibly fiendish, but that's the only difference. And so if you happen to get sucked in by one of these scammers, it's really difficult to find your way out. But the best way to sort of not get yourself in that situation is bookmark all your exchange accounts and all the sites that you generally travel to in crypto. So bookmarked, it's in your browser. There's no way you're going to go to a fake site.
Good, excellent. I suppose that ticks off everything that I was hoping to cover today. Unless there's anything else that you'd like to touch on, or you think that we've missed, then let me know.
Yeah, so like I said before, crypto is a massive rabbit hole. I've been diving deeper and deeper and deeper, for the last year and a half, and that's why I set up the website. It's really difficult to find useful information, trustworthy information, and if you're interested in the space, just to make a bit of money on the side, or because you're interested in the technology, just do as much research as you can. There's plenty of great stuff out there, and like I said, you can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's still really fascinating. So if there's any questions anybody still has, just get out there and do as much research as you can, really.
Fantastic, excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Jack. You've been very informative, and I hope that anyone listening to this feels a hell of a lot more confident in the space of crypto.
Cool, thanks Sam, thanks for the opportunity.
Super, excellent.